2023 Celebrate Cowley County History Program. And as Cindy has indicated, please sign in either their sign-in sheets on the tables or back at this table at the northwest door. There's a sign in there. Please sign in so we can know how many we have here today. And specifically, as she indicated, if you have ideas or suggestions for topics, or more particularly the topic you would like to write a paper about, please indicate there or contact any one of the committee members we have here. First of all, we'd like to recognize the Celebrate Cowley County History Committee that's gone to the work of putting this program together today. Cindy Goertz is the chair over here. Jerry Wallace on the committee. James Sandbolt, Gloria Ulbrich back yonder. Boss Farr, who's right over here. And Gary Learned, who's running the technical stuff over here. Gary, incidentally, is the president this year of the Cowley County Historical Society Museum. And speaking of them, on the south wall over here, we have museum members there to sell the books. If you haven't got a book yet thus far, please see them that. Also, there are other items from the museum that are there available for sale, including the brick. If you want to throw one, Elena's holding one. If you don't buy one, she may throw one at you. So please just check out over there what the museum does have available for sale here today. Which that kind of brings up something I want to clarify with everybody, because frequently there is some confusion as to the relationship between the Cowley County Historical Society Museum and the Celebrate Cowley County History Committee. They're technically two separate and distinct entities, even though all the members on the Celebrate Cowley County History Committee are or were in the past very active in the museum. They're still separate entities. The Cowley County Celebrate History Committee is responsible for selecting the topics to be written and helping get the topics written and put together and printed in the book and presented here today, and making this program possible and actually putting on the program. The museum does not financially contribute to actually putting on this program. Now, what to do an agreement between the two entities. The Celebrate History Committee puts all this together, puts the book together, and gets it to the printer. The museum then prints or pays for printing the book and then sells the book as a fundraiser for the museum. But still, the museum does not contribute financially toward actually putting the program on today, which leads me up to the little blue bowls on your table. Because the contributions that go into those bowls are what actually we use to pay for putting the program on today. And there are expenses associated with it. There is a little expense for just getting the books put together. Of course, we have to pay to use the room here at Baden Square, to pay for the refreshments back there, and things such as that. It comes out to about $750 just to put this program on. And that's why we really appreciate the contributions that you may make in the blue bowls. Specifically, since those of us on the committee, if we don't get enough to pay for the program, we have to cough up the rest of it. So we do very much appreciate your contributions in that regard. Now that I've cried, I have to say something here. I want to explain how our plan for today. We've got, as you know, 3 papers to be presented. We're going to do 2 papers first, then we'll take a break of about 10 minutes or so you have a chance to buy books if you haven't, to check what else the museum may have for sale over here, to get refresh your coffee, get some cookies that we'll have in the back and that sort of thing. And then we will have a special reading and then culminate with the last paper of today. So with that, our first speaker is a man that we really are honored to have in our community. You can read his actual bio at the back of your book, but he grew up in Winfield, went to school here, college, he went on to a very significant career in journalism and various related fields all around the United States. And he's lived lots of places other than Winfield, Kansas, and could live any place in the country that he wanted to very well. So, fortunately for us, upon retirement, he and his wife Mary, who we're also happy to have back here, agreed to return to Winfield. And not only that, since he's been here, he has shared his training, his education, his experience, and his knowledge in all these areas by writing a number of papers that have been in previous Celebrate Cowley County History programs. And so again, we're very pleased to have him this morning. I'd like to introduce Bob Hartley to come present his program this morning.
As I have learned, this microphone business doesn't always work. Can you hear me back there? Mary, put at your hand if you can hear me. Before reading the paper, I would like to offer a couple of notes. First, a great thanks to Lucy Yuse of Emporia, a direct descendant of Josiah Weimer. Lucy worked tirelessly for this project. I had hoped she could join us today, but circumstances have prevented that. Nonetheless, I want to put on record as she as a partner in this effort. Second, try as we may, and that includes Lucy and her family, we were unable to locate an image of Josiah. We scoured the nation, and there, as far as we're concerned, there is none existing. The family had none in its files either. While I regret that, I believe the information in this paper paints a pretty clear picture of this important young man. A pioneer life. Josiah W. for Washington, Weimer's adventures in Cowley County and Yellowstone Park, 1870 to 1886. Welcome to the world of Josiah Washington Weimer, pioneer resident of Cowley County and adventurer, much of it described in his own words and those of his admirers. Gabriel and Lydia Weimer and their 6 children migrated from Ohio to Kansas about 1870, settling in Coffee County near Burlington. Their oldest surviving child, Josiah, born July 19, 1844, had already emerged as an independent young man, unafraid of hard work. Josiah had served in the Civil War as a 19-year-old Union soldier. A well-educated and accomplished communicator, he had earned a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master's degree at Mount Union College in Ohio. In Kansas, he taught school and worked temporarily at the Grange elevator in Wichita. When Osage Trust lands opened to the public in southern Kansas around and after 1870, Weimer, respectful of land ownership and containing a family farming tradition, purchased farmland in Cowley County. Trust lands could be purchased for a minimum price of $1.25 per acre. He applied for 160 acres in Richland Township, near the northern boundary of Cowley County with Butler County, not far from the early settlement of Polo, P-O-L-O. That community, with postal service, was near where Atlanta was founded in 1885. If Weimer paid the minimum price for the land, the cost would have been $200. That was serious money in the 1870s. The purchase was completed in 1873. Trust land buyers had up to a year to pay, and Weimer set about to establish a sheep farm. Newspaper accounts showed he had as many as 500 head of sheep at one time. Where did he get the money? As we learned, he had worked and saved. He never married and could move around easily and could live inexpensively. In the 1870s, Cowley County population was thin and scattered. The 1870 federal census counted 1,175 residents in the county. The 1880 census, on the other hand, of 21,500 captures the impressive growth of the county. Weimer witnessed it firsthand. Outside the towns of Winfield and Arkansas City, the small towns of Baden and Cambridge had just begun in 1870. They all had weekly newspapers, however, and it soon became evident that Weimer kept in touch with editors and was watched carefully as someone who might be a leader of the new county. His name appeared in print frequently. In the context of the times, he was news. The proximity of his land to Butler County presented an early political opportunity. In 1873, after moving in with his brother in Douglas, he stood for election as Butler County Surveyor. He was unopposed and served in the position in 1874 and 1875. Early land surveyors were busy determining individual ownership rules and establishing county and township borders. There was speculation that Weimer taught school in Butler during that time, but no records survive. As the eldest Weimer child, known as Wash by friends and family, convinced siblings to settle in the Douglas area. There would be Weimer kin in that community well into the 1900s. After the Butler venture, he focused on activities in Cowley County. Two of his involvements generated a constituency for politics and future activity. Many of the early settlers of Cowley County were Union veterans of the Civil War. They organized to reminisce and affirm the commitment to service, and Weimer participated enthusiastically. At the same time, Weimer was on the ground floor of Republican organizations throughout the county. He helped form a party outpost in Richland Township and served as an officer. On various occasions, he was mentioned as a possible candidate for Justice of the Peace and Cowley Surveyor. He did not run for either. Weimer was outspoken on Kansas issues of the day. He was known as a, quote, temperance man, favoring prohibition law. He also was a voice for regulation of railroads, an issue of statewide interest. Prohibition was the emotional issue of the day, and Cowley County and adjoining counties were hotbeds of support for a state constitutional amendment to prohibit alcoholic beverages. After widespread campaigns, the legislature authorized a vote for a constitutional amendment. The public approved in 1880, and prohibition took effect in 1881. It lasted until 1948. Wash's candidacy for state representative in the 1882 election gathered momentum early in the year within the Republican Party and among his supporters on county newspapers. House District 68, which included the northern portion of Cowley County, was Weimer's target. After nomination, Weimer prepared a statement of candidacy, which the Courier published. It was Weimer's first written work for public consumption, but far from his last. In it, he stated positions on the day's major issues. The piece opened with an appeal to come inside. He wrote, "Bright on the plain of my life shall be a fertile spot, evergreen to the memory of many friends for their respect. Without consulting personal interests, which, in one's own opinion, are not small, I am before the voters of the 68th District. From a sense of duty and loyalty to law and loyalty to the best interests of the majority upon the subject of prohibition, I will say the line was drawn a year ago in 1881, and we will fight it out on this line if it takes all summer." His work for the party, outspoken support of prohibition, and participation in highly publicized veteran rallies in 1881 and 1882 made the difference. He won election for state representative with 55% of the vote against the Democratic Party challenger. For someone who came to Cowley County with no known political agenda and no known connections to the founding fathers of the county and Winfield and Arkansas City, Weimer's political rise and performance made news. It helped that he enjoyed being with people, that he wrote and spoke with ease and comprehension. He made a mark that indicated there were unlimited possibilities for Cowley constituents. During his inaugural term in the legislature beginning in January 1883, the political world in Washington, D.C. was preoccupied with trying to bring order out of chaos in Yellowstone National Park. Early park visitors and nearby settlers defaced the wonders of Yellowstone. They cut timber at will and poached wildlife, while promoters with money encouraged unchecked commercial development. In an effort to appoint officials for establishing and enforcing rules of conduct in the park, Congress appropriated money during the 1883 session for a resident superintendent and 10 assistants. They were charged with reducing damage and vandalism in the nation's first national park. The opportunity to serve as an assistant superintendent caught Weimer's attention. In March, he asked Kansas U.S. Senator Preston Plum to recommend him for appointment by the Department of Interior. The senator acted quickly and with enthusiasm, setting in motion a dramatic change for Weimer's future, personal commitment, and connection to the people of Cowley County. Excuse me. His appointment as assistant superintendent was in place by June 5, 1883, and he served until August 1886. Starting in June 1883, Interior Department officials had difficulty finding Weimer to inform him of selection. After weeks of searching, they located him at the Polo settlement and informed him of the selection. Weimer filled out his oath, and the deal was done. He left Kansas in August 1883 for the Yellowstone adventure. Assistants were paid $90 to $900 a year, but had to pay their own transportation costs and arrange for room and board until the park provided them later. $900 in 1883 was the equivalent in today's dollars of $26,000. Instinctively aware of how this would influence his Cowley County standing, Weimer cut a deal with the Winfield Courier, a consistent promoter of Weimer's various activities, to write periodic accounts of life in Yellowstone Park for publication. The Courier editor already knew of Weimer's creative writing abilities, and he recognized the potential for high readership interest from an audience with little knowledge of the Wonderland, but familiarity with Weimer. Weimer wrote 6 lengthy articles about his adventures in Yellowstone, creating a written vision of Weimer's awe and what made Yellowstone unique for Courier readers. Most of the letters appeared in the fall of 1883 and winter and spring of 1884. He wrote again early in 1886. When Josiah W. Weimer took pen in hand and applied ink to paper, the subjects came alive in memorable phrases and descriptions with superb and appropriate word selection. He wrote what we would describe, thank you. Look if there's anything in He wrote what we would describe as a travelogue, inspiring readers to pack up and head for Yellowstone. He was a gifted writer. Here is an example from his description in one letter of the Upper Geyser Basin. Quote, "Thus, day and night, the scenes with the accompanying music go on, some lashing the air in angry fury with boiling water, while others fill the air with groans of monster spirits writhing in agony on account of close confinement. On a clear, bright morning, the basin looks like a great manufacturing city. Only instead of the dirty black smoke, there are white clouds of steam, and in most places, the surroundings are exquisitely clean." Weimer's writing skill gave the letters a personal one-on-one feeling. Several times he reassured Cowley readers that he missed them and thought of them often. He left the impression that he intended to return on a permanent basis. What he did not write about was the turmoil in the park and the controversies that swirled around activities and some missteps by some assistant superintendents. Today we know most of the details from news accounts of the time and subsequent revelations by historians. Importantly for our story, Weimer addressed the park's issues and reports written to his boss, the superintendent, from 1883 to 1885. These were available for this paper from park archives, but were not published during Weimer's life, and as far as I know, they were not published until now. In 13 reports, handwritten and signed by Weimer, we learn of life in the remote parts of the park, efforts to curtail wanton killing of animal life and damage to the hot springs and geysers, and frustrations of an assistant who had little law enforcement authority, but for whom others had high expectations. One of the first reports gives a glimpse of supplies ordered for the assignment in the northeast part of the park. He spent the winter of 1884 there. For 2 years, after the summer of 1884 to the summer of 1886, he was stationed full-time at the Upper Geyser Basin, the prime attraction for tourists then and now, and the target of commercial expansion efforts. He was at the center of action, where Old Faithful greeted him every day. In one letter, Weimer described the phenomenon, quote, "like an ever-watchful sentinel, or the ruler of a small empire. Thus, faithful day and night, winter and summer, cold and warm, by his regularity, has gained the admiration of all that ever saw him." An example of the issues he confronted and his frustrations appeared in a July 27, 1884 report to the superintendent. He wrote, "I have noticed a great tendency to gather specimens and break formations, and always when I interfere, I am met with the question, why are the rules of the park not posted somewhere that people might know what they are? Undaunted, Weimer took matters in his own hands. He put up a notice that stated, quote, breaking or defacing the formations and throwing things into the geysers are forbidden by order of the Secretary of the Interior. In a later report, after warning tourists about vandalism, Weimer cited a Wyoming law signed by Governor William Hale, but that didn't make his job any easier. The longer Weimer remained on the job, the bolder he became in openly expressing his opinion on matters of internal conflict and about ethics violations and suspicious financial behavior of the superintendent, his boss. By 1885, Superintendent Robert Carpenter had come under official criticism, and Weimer felt compelled to enter the discussion. Writing to the Secretary of Interior, Henry M. Teller, on January 15, 1885, Weimer, obviously speaking for other assistants, stated, quote, so bold and grave are the irregularities and crimes charged against Mr. Carpenter that silence on my part would be dereliction of duty to you and myself. Referring to affidavits made by other assistants, he said, Carpenter inveigled assistants to sign vouchers for services that they did not perform and supplies that they did not furnish. Also to endorse checks for amounts and purposes to them unknown, which he retained. Weimer called for Carpenter to make restitution, set aright the wrongs. We will be only too glad to acquiesce. Otherwise, his early resignation will be welcomed by an indignant community. End quote. Carpenter was fired on May 29. As 1886 began, Congress struggled to appropriate funds for civilian administration of the park for another year. Weimer wrote again for the Courier in January in what would be his final letter. He reported on an incident in which he and a fellow assistant chased down vandalism suspects. He wrote, quote, after 15 days hard work, we succeeded in bagging 8 horses and 5 men who called themselves old-timers or bad men. They were convicted and fined. Their guns, knives, etc. were confiscated, and they were turned loose with a better opinion of law and order. He added what could be, he considered, his ode to home. Quote, I almost forgot to say that during my long silence, the Courier has wended its way to the backbone of creation and kept me posted on the boom and healthy progress you are having. Cowley is sure to be the great bread and meat county of the West. So, Mr. Editor, put me down for Cowley and its people, first, last, and all the time, for I'm sure to be there. He continued, it might be interesting for our folks to know that the Yellowstone National Park is the outgrowth of the spirit of Kansas aggressiveness, a monument of grace to the nation of which Kansas, above every other state, has a right to be proud. It was made a park by a bill introduced by Kansas Senator Samuel R. Pomeroy in 1872. Thanks to the wisdom of Congress for its true spirit of conservation, for securing the marvelous scenes for the people of the whole world that nature has centered here, and now preserves in their integrity, safe from vandalism and the greed of speculation. In special reports and published accounts for 3 years, The assistants were criticized, verbally assailed, and some were condemned. But Weimer persisted. He did the job to satisfaction and survived, when most other assistants did not. His work ended in August 1886 when Congress failed to appropriate funds to run the park, and it was taken over by the military. That would continue to 1918. Weimer submitted his resignation and returned to Cowley County to revitalize its farmland in Richland Township and connect in Douglas, where members of his family welcomed him. Almost immediately, he fell ill, lingering for 2 weeks or more before dying at the Douglas home of his sister, Ollie Martin, on November 6th. Death was variously attributed to, quote, typhoid, malarial fever, or mountain fever. He was 42 years old. He is buried in the Douglas Cemetery with a monument of bronze that can only be described as spectacular. A treasured remembrance of Wash Weimer, passed down through succeeding family generations, is a depiction in oil of the upper falls of the Yellowstone River in the national park, painted by African-American artist Grafton Tyler Brown. During his time as an assistant superintendent, Josiah obtained the oil painting directly from Brown, in all likelihood just before he resigned in 1886. The artist titled the scene Grand Canyon and Falls from Hayden Point, Yellowstone Park. Descendants of Josiah sold the painting in 2007 for $25,000. Weimer also obtained a copy of a photograph of Old Faithful, probably taken by F.J. Haynes, who was famed for his Yellowstone images. That too was passed down to Weimer's family. And it's on the cover, on the front of the article, my article in the booklet. A lasting part of Josiah's legacy are the letters and other communications from the park, as published by the Winfield Courier, and his handwritten reports to the Yellowstone superintendents that are in the park archives. In those communications, Weimer's writing skills stand out, and his part of the park's history is affirmed. Josiah Washington Weimer, Wash as we knew it, lived life, brief as it was, with gusto and a sincere devotion to Cowley County people.
Thanks, Bob. Good travels. As some of you know, Bob and Mary are leaving now to head to a warmer climate for a while, so certainly wish you good travels. You're safe.
We're going to Yellowstone Park. So.
Right. Our next speaker told me she really didn't need an introduction, in which case I don't know who it is. But we can't let her get off that easy, because although there are probably a few of you in this room who either have not gone to school with her, been taught by her, or served with her on one of the other many community committees and activities and all that which she has been involved, because for the last number of years, this person has been one of the most community-oriented people in Winfield. Besides being chair of the Celebrate Cowley County History Committee, she's also and has been for a number of years, the chair of the event committee for the museum, constantly coming up with great ideas for new events to be held either at the museum or elsewhere. So with that, ask Cindy Goertz to come up and present her paper on the Stone Bridge, capital of Kansas.
Oh my goodness, I'm not quite sure about that. I love stone bridges, and so do many of you. And so it was one of those things that happened a few years ago that Deb Fireball, who was with the Cowley First at the time, called and said, Cindy, would you mind giving a stone bridge tour? And I thought, I don't know anything about these stone bridges. And so I immediately started researching a little bit more, and I found it very, very fascinating. And I said, sure, I'll give a couple of stone bridge tours, and never expected to write the paper because I thought someone else would write the paper or write the book that Steve Treadway was going to do, and I would just talk to you about what I would do with the stone bridges. Well, that didn't quite turn out the same way. So anyway, if you have your booklet, you'll notice that today, with the time frame that we have, there wasn't enough time to go ahead and visit with you about each of the bridges, but in your booklet, there is a place that every one of the bridges that you can still see on that pamphlet, they are talked about. There's a picture in there. There's information about each one of them, and those are in your booklets, as well as the other things that I'll talk about. So I decided today that I wanted to focus on, first, how in the world did Cowley County ever get recognized as a Stone Bridge capital? I mean, we are recognized for a lot of things, but Stone Bridge capital of Kansas, how did that happen? Some important people that were involved with that, a little bit about Walter Sharp, who happened to be the most important person that seemed to be around at the time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those and then share some gone but not forgotten bridges that were huge stone bridges here in Cowley County. And then I have to share three of my most favorites. They might not be your favorites, but they were mine for different reasons. So anyway, out of curiosity, how many of you have been on a Stone Arch Bridge tour? How many of you have maybe taken your own self-guided tour? How many of you have kind of been frustrated because you got out there and you thought, I can't even see this bridge? And you're wondering, why not? And now it seems like drones seem to be the best way to do that. Anyway, if you've taken your own tour, I love it when you get out there because all of a sudden you're coming up and you think, I know it has to be here because there's a stream here. And you come up to it and here it is, and it's this little tiny narrow bridge, no side rails, probably up, oh, well, there's usually a real stern curve that gets to that bridge because there was a road coming and all of a sudden they had to get a bridge in here. So you have a sharp curve and then you get up and most of them have a steep arch. And you get to the top of that arch and you think, I can't even see what's coming from the other side. I wonder what's going to come meet me. Any of you experience that? A little bit of adventure along the way. So, how did Cowley County end up getting noticed as the Stone Bridge capital of Kansas? And that's where I want to start. In 2015, the Cowley County Tourism Alliance, and I'm going to readjust this somewhere or another, I think. It's a mess. Here we go. The Cowley County First and the Cowley County Tourism Alliance decided that they were going to put out some brochures about bridges because that was fascinating, and they were also doing some of the barn quilts at the time. And so they began researching, and what they found out was that Cowley County had more stone bridges still on public, this is a key, public roads, than any other county in the state. And when they researched, they found out that 18 of the 2,000 remaining in the United States were also in Cowley County. And so they said, okay, it's time for us to do something about that. And so what they did, they went to the county commissioners in February of that year, and they said, we think we've got something here that needs to go forward. We think we need to be the Stonebridge capital of Kansas. And they said, we agree with you. And so they joined forces with Cowley First and the Tourism Alliance, and they took it to the state legislature. And it went through. The House passed it in 2015. The Senate passed it in January of 2016. And Governor Brownback signed it in, officially naming Cowley County as the Stonebridge capital of Kansas because of this large size. Now, Butler County has a few more bridges than we do, but they're small culvert type. As a Stonebridge capital of Kansas because of the large size of the bridges, the large number of those stone bridges that were on public roads that people could actually travel on each day. So, Cowley First recognized that as a great marketing tool. And so they began providing Stone Arch Bridge tours, much like Gary Gackstatter had done in the 90s. And sadly, most of those group tours have had to be discontinued because of the condition of the bridges and the added load limits and more fences on the properties, and it's a little harder to get down to see. I will tell you, if you want to do that on your own, February and the beginning of March is the best time to do it because you don't have all of the other foliage out and the leaves aren't out. It's a lot easier to see all of these places. So anyway, the drones seem to be the best. So anyway, they've always created a great deal of interest. So no more did we have the bridge tours, but we have to say a thank you to Gary Gackstatter because back in the 90s, he was an art instructor at Cowley College, and he had pen and ink sketches. And one of the times, he had one of his art shows, and people asked him, they said, where in the world did you find these bridges to photograph? And he said, well, I started visiting with people in the restaurants, and I talked to the rural postal carriers, and they pointed me to these bridges. And they said, well, where are they? And he said, they're right in your backyard. And they were all surprised because they had no idea they were driving over them every day. And so he thought, okay, they want to see them too, let's do something about it. So he went to Ellen Snell in Arc City with our City Arts Council, and she agreed to organize a tour, rent a school bus, hire the chuck wagon to prepare lunch, and they were off and running with tours. And within a few years, those bridge tours were featured on Sunflower Journey, in the Kansas Magazine, several newspapers, and Larry Cattenberg's People. And it became the most successful touring program in the state. He said they ended up taking over 2,000 people from many states out to those bridges. Did any of you ever happen to go on one of Gary Gackstatter's? 3 or 4 of you. And he did it so that it went to the Dexter area, they had lunch, and then they ended up going into the Cambridge area in 2 different sections. Also instrumental in all of the documenting of the bridges was Steve Treadway. And on the table over here, I have put the calendar that he had prepared in 16 for 17, and he met a very untimely death in October of 16. Fortunately, he had already prepared his calendar. He had a vast knowledge of the Stone Arch bridges, and his favorite bridge builder in Cowley County, which happened to be the most prolific one, who was Walter Sharp. At the time of his death, he was compiling this information into a book, and that was never completed. All of these folks realized that there was something special about the stone bridges in Cowley County. They were more than 100 years old. They are still traveled on today. And even back when Walter Sharp started building them in the early 1900s, he realized they were special. He said they were beautiful to look at, but they were going to be durable, they would last forever, and he said they will carry your history. Wow. Amazing that someone back in the 1900s, early 1900s, already realized that. Well, another question I had was, how in the world do they build these things? Have you ever wondered that? When you went out there and you saw that, how did they do this? They didn't have any of the equipment we have today. And instead, I probably lost him over here. We are going to look at how a bridge was built. And Walter Sharp provided that information clearly to the Wichita Eagle in 1922. He said, once you had the location on the creek located, then he said he looked for the limestone on the ledges around the creek. And some of those ledges ranged in thickness from 12 to 36 inches. He stripped the dirt off those limestone ledges, and the great slabs of rock were revealed. And if you look in the picture, feathers and wedges were then put into those blocks, and they were split so that it became like big paving brick. And once they were split, they weighed 2 to 3 tons, and they would be picked up by hand-cranked derricks. And the one at Badger Creek actually is on the national or state historic because one of their stones is 9 tons. Once split, those stones were moved to a site with a horse and mules. But before the arch could be formed, some type of a foundation had to be built. And in Cowley County, we were fortunate enough to have bedrock that was very deep. And Walter Sharp would go out and check the bedrock when he was approached first and said, do I have the bedrock I need? That had to be a good foundation or the stone arch bridge wasn't going to hold. After that, he would look and say, okay, we've got to have a form, much as anyone does now with concrete. You had to go make a form, and so they formed an arch, and we did it usually with wood because we had timber in our area. And so that you would form the arch and then bring the stones in to begin building from the bottom to the top. And of course, the last one was your keystone at the very top. Now, the reason Walter Sharp was so successful is because he used the local farmers. He taught them how to cut the stone, and it would usually take 2 to 3 hours to shape. They got 40 cents an hour to do it. If he had hired stone cutters, they would cost $10 a day, and they'd spend a day and a half for every stone that was put in there. So he had definitely figured out the more efficient way to do it, because are those stones on the inside ever going to be seen by anyone? No. And he also then inserted grout, and this was really important. After it was built, then he inserted grout around it in order to keep the water out and to provide strength for that bridge. And that was unique. So sometimes you'll see them called stone arch concrete bridges instead of stone arch, because some were just laid up stone, nothing else. Then fill material was added to the top and an approach made to make it passable. And those were a pair of parallel walls, spandrels, and they were filled with dirt and gravel, or Sharp liked to fill them with gravel and small stones because they were much more durable. And then, depending on the rise of the arch, they had to expand that approach out so that you could actually cross that bridge. So now, you know when there's a hump in the road when you cross the bridge. Had you ever wondered? I always thought, why is that always there? That's the reason. In your booklet, you'll find also his unique design that he used that other people didn't do that made his withstand the floods much better. So that's described in your booklet. Now, Walter Sharp, he's the man whose innovative bridge design changed the way the bridges were going to be built from 1901 to 1925. And it said he built more than 110 stone bridges in Cowley, or in Kansas, by 1904. He built bridges in Cowley, Butler, Greenwood counties, became well known in other states as well. And so then, how in the world did Cowley County ever get him here? And that, to me, is a fascinating story. It says in the late 1800s, there were a lot of bridges being built, and our commissioners were very much on top of this, and they realized that good roads were an economic necessity, and we needed good bridges with the roads. So they set up a special bridge fund, and by 1906, 20 bridges had been built. However, most of them were iron trussed, and they had timber with them, and during floods, they would sustain a great deal of damage and get oftentimes washed away. They were expensive to build and repair, and so they were considering options. And you know how they kind of sometimes talk in their hallways of, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, the story goes that there was a janitor at the courthouse, Mr. Forbes, and he overheard them talking, and he said, I've got the answer. Just bring down this bridge builder from El Dorado. He was building bridges that are more durable and cost-effective. Cost-effective. Well, the commissioners were kind of reluctant to begin with, but they agreed they'd go meet Mr. Walter Sharp and examine his work, and they did. And according to the Winfield Courier, after seeing his work, they were so well pleased they declared after this the only stone arch bridges could be built in Cowley County. And to make it a sure thing, they brought him down immediately. And they put him to work, and the first bridge he built was in 1901, and it was just south of Wilmot. And today, guess where that bridge is? Under the Winfield City Lake, the very first bridge ever built. Yeah, kind of interesting, isn't it? Walter and the Sharp family continued to live in El Dorado. He traveled between the two towns until 1910, when he finally moved his family to Winfield. Now, I have to say this, and it's, Sharp was sharp. He not only knew how to build a bridge, but he knew how to bid a bridge and utilized local labor to keep that cost down and keep the money in the county. And he quickly became one of, and there were many that were building bridges at the time, but he quickly became the one that the county contacted first. His son returned here in the 80s, and he explained how he would watch his father work up a bid. He said Dad would meet with the county engineer at the proposed site, and after discussion to determine the location, he said rods would be driven into the ground to find the depth of that bedrock. If it wasn't deep enough, it's not going to work. And after some rough measurements were made, the final plans were discussed, and his father and the engineer would go sit on the riverbank. I can just see him. Use an old envelope and write on the back of it to figure out the cost. Have any of you ever done that, grabbed whatever to figure out the cost of something? And because of his experienced guesswork, he would determine the cost he thought that bridge would be. One arch was usually $1,500. 3 arches, about $3,400. So now to some of those bridges. I haven't included everything that's in your booklet, but I wanted to highlight a few of those that are gone but not forgotten. And for some of you, take a quick look. Raise your hand if you kind of remember some of these bridges. Anybody remember a few? Gary remembers one of them, I know, because we talked about it. They were incredible bridges. Some of them went down just because they weren't built very well. Some of them went down because after years of extensive flooding, they just didn't happen to last. Some were by local builders, but there's also a couple there that Sharp built as well. This next picture shows a couple of those that were lesser known, but one of them is one that was built right south of Cambridge and south to, thank you to Emory Lewis and his site. This one was built just south of Cambridge on Cedar Creek. And then the Hoyt Bridge, which was built over around Dexter. Both of those are examples that we don't usually hear about that are gone but not forgotten. This next one was the first big bridge that Walter Sharp had as the premier bridge, because after the success, and I have to share with you, you know, sometimes people have great ideas and they're a little reluctant to say, hey, let's go for it. Well, that happened with the first bridge. They had experienced some other stone arch bridges going down, and so the landowners in that area of the first bridge up around Wilmot said, are you kidding us? You are actually going to build a stone bridge, and they threatened to sue the county because they were going to not dam up, but put a bridge across the timber, and it was going to ruin everything. Well, it's kind of funny because as soon after that bridge was built and they had the first flood, and they could find out that the farmers had some extra work and they could earn extra money, and the labor was local, and the money for the bridge construction stayed in the county, they thought it was a great idea. You know, those things happen. So anyway, in 1902, he was given the contract for the Dunkard Mill Bridge. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it was southeast of our city, and it was built over the Walnut. The original plan called for 3 arches, and if you look at that picture, you notice it has 4. As it was being built, it had a lot of challenges. The day after it was announced that the first arch was completed, it collapsed. The workmen had pulled the framework out before it had been grouted. And so it collapsed. So they had to rebuild it. And they said, okay, now it's going to be finished in May. We're going to dedicate it in June. A committee in the South Bend community met together, and they planned the whole dedication. It was a big celebration. But right before it was to be dedicated, second complication, a flood occurred. And it was pretty apparent right then that that waterway was not going to be big enough to permit the water to move downstream, and the Walnut backed up. And so to solve the problem, they said, hey, we need another arch. So instead of dedicating in May, they said, we're going to build the other arch smaller, and we'll dedicate in September. And so then, once the dedication was scheduled, they had the big celebration. And Sharp was a little tentative about getting paid. I mean, these have been a lot of complications. So in May, he went ahead, and every one of the bridges has a naming plate on it. He had that naming plate engraved with the county commissioners' names and his name. He was going to make sure he got paid, which of course he did. And then they had the big celebration. Approximately 2,000 people attended this celebration. And at the end of it, the crowd gathered on the bridge and a photograph was taken. And this was a postcard then that later appeared. This bridge showed the success of a stone arch bridge because it withstood through a lot of severe floods until the 1940s when there was immense flood. And today, there's another bridge in that area, but right beside it, if you look down, and you'll see it in your booklets, if you look down beside it, there's remains of that original bridge down in the water. The next bridge I wanted to mention that is gone but not forgotten is south of Dexter on Grouse Creek. And that lets me explain the name Goodnight Bridge. Names were given to these bridges according to the families that lived close by, because they owned the land into the middle of the creek. And it also was a way to designate where that bridge was, because on Grouse Creek there were 14 stone bridges built before 1922. By giving it a name, it gave a location because people knew where those families were. And at one time this bridge, that's okay. At one time that Goodnight Bridge held the title for the longest arch bridge in Kansas. It was a single arch bridge, and when he was building it, he said, "The Dexter limestone is the best stone he ever built with. It was suitable in size, it possessed the strength, easily worked up, and it was resistant to hot and cold weather, which was key to the success of the bridge." And that bridge is also in ruins, but there's one abutment and approach that's clearly visible if you know where to look on that Grouse Creek Road. Now, there were a couple other bridges that were gone but not forgotten in folks' memories. And of course, one of them was the Fox Bridge, which all of you kind of remember went down in 2016. And then, of course, the Dutch Creek Bridge near Floral. And Abe Finney actually built the Fox Bridge. And he was a man that was a quarryman and built other buildings. I'm kind of waiting on this to come back up. In Cambridge, and built some of the stone buildings in there. Now, this bridge at the time got Sharp's attention because it was huge. It was a 70-foot span, 113 feet long, 12 feet wide, and it was well known, of course, for many decades because it was wide open around the area and you could easily photograph it, and it was painted a lot. Sharp noticed it, yeah, we don't have it yet. Sharp noticed that, and that was his inspiration for the Branson Bridge.
Cindy hasn't had to reboot everything, it looks like.
Really? Wow.
I've lost connection to the projection system.
Amy, I don't know whether, can Amy help you? Well, while we're waiting, the Fox Bridge was one that, yeah, would be nice to have it up there, but whatever. Anyway, it was one that Abe Matheny built, and he was also was a prolific bridge builder here in Cowley County. And it was demolished in '99 because, as many of you might have taken that road, it had a big S-curve in it. And the bridge itself was crooked. So how they managed to do that, I'm not quite sure, but it was a little dangerous curve in through there. And Mike Bocamp and Gary Backstatter, during break on my computer, I've got the video that they took the day that it was demolished. Gary Backstatter said, "I'll be the last person that stands on this bridge." And anyway, Sharp didn't want to be outdone, and so he built the Branson Bridge, and that for him was a signature bridge for years because he made it 5 feet bigger. He was not going to be outdone. 5 feet bigger than Finney had done because he wasn't going to let Finney go down as the premier bridge builder. And he spoke of that bridge for many, many years into the 20s. And actually, it did hold the record as the biggest one until it collapsed in the 2000s. There were some other bridges built around on the Grouse Creek, around Silverdale. And regardless of where they were built, they had a purpose. They allowed for those living in the area to safely cross. and they help with the economic growth and opportunities of those areas in the county. If you have a booklet and you look at it, I've organized the bridges that are there according to the townships. And 11 of the 25 townships in the county still have stone bridges within their boundaries that you can visit. Now, there's others that are on private property, but you can't go there. And oftentimes you'll get frustrated when you go because you say, well, I've got the 2016, but I can't get to all of them. Example is, and I had a picture up here of the Ulbrich Bridge because it's now on private property and that road has been closed. The Kirk-Hood-ish Crossing Bridge, it sustained so much damage through the years with flooding, and recently there's actually a hole in the top of the bridge. And so the bridge itself is closed as well as the road. I wanted to just share my three that are my favorites, and we will, I think he's loading, just so you can see those last three. My most favorite three, and you probably have different ones. The Floral Bridge. I love going to the Floral Bridge. If you come in from the south, on the southeast corner, instead of coming through Floral, you can see the winding road that comes in through it. You can see the naming immediately and appreciate the whole bridge. And the old picture that is with that slide, if we see it, and he can play it maybe during the break, is one that my son-in-law gave me, and it shows the men on that bridge, and it still shows the support underneath it. It had not been taken out yet. And one of his relatives, Absalom Beaver, was one of them that is on that bridge. So that was kind of neat. The next bridge is one you probably all visited at one time or another, and that was that Andes Bridge. However, it was really the Silver Creek Jordan Bridge. And Beverly Johnson shared many of those photos with me because her great-grandparents were the Jordans. And so they had many things out there. How many of you used to go out there? It was the old swimming hole bridge of Cowley County. Yeah, has a nice smooth bedrock under it, and great swimming hole. And in the 20s and the 30s, it was used as a car wash too. They just drive a car in there, circle around, and until it was clean and head off. But it has great memories, and it's a wonderful place to visit and see. And my third one is probably a surprise to you because it's the smallest one, and it's the County Poor Farm. And I love it because you can get right down to it. You can see how it was supported, and you can see down through it. You just get an up-close personal feel to that bridge. And it was also built by Walter Sharp. All three of my favorite bridges, Walter Sharp bridges. Yeah. So anyway, many of you probably have a lot of others that are favorites. Very good. Okay, you want to rip through right through those to the very last one, and then we can put those up later.
Yeah.
Because I want to close with a final one that seems to really say what these bridges are to all of us. They seem to capture that feeling. And this particular person has been doing a lot of research, VP Lindsay, on the stone bridges. These bridges not only connect two banks of a stream, but after a fashion, the past with the present. Whether it's a story of the Near Bridge and how the current stone arch is built over the ruins of the Fifths, or how Doc Smith built a stone arch bridge over timber that is still there to this day, or the simple everyday stories of picnic, 4th of July celebrations, the lives that surround the history of the Jordan Bridge, Andes Bridge over Silver Creek. Much of the history of Cowley County and its people is linked to those graceful structures, still spanning streams as they have for many years. And you think they've been all found? No. Recently, this fall, after I finished paper, they found several more in around Dexter on Plum Creek, and they are small culvert size. And those they have documented. And just last month, they found one over around north of Cambridge. And they don't know yet who built it. They haven't fully documented, but it appears to be very old. So, my challenge to you is keep your eyes open. Who knows? Maybe you'll be discovering one of those little stone arch bridges that nobody's known about yet, and you've driven over day after day after day. And I will be around for questions, and we'll put the slides up so that you can see those other pictures during break.
Thanks, Cindy. Let's take about a 10-minute or so break, during which time, please, if you haven't purchased a booklet yet, or would like to see and purchase some other items the museum has available over the south wall. Decorations back on the west side. So, take a few minutes. Well, thanks. I would take the opportunity to remind you about these holes in the middle of these papers, what they're for. But our next presentation is going to be a paper. They're gradually getting there. You don't quiet down, Judy will whistle again. Our next presentation is a paper that was written by an individual, and it's something that the committee looked at and thought it fit well in with the gist of this program. Like I said, it was written by an individual who was born in a small country town, went to a local college, then went off to do have a great career in journalism throughout the United States, but never really forgot from whence he had come, and wrote a paper pertaining to that. And we're fortunate to have Kent Melcher has agreed to come read this to us and get to the bottom of that deal. Part of the reason the committee thought it was appropriate is by reading it, and what you'll hear there indicates because he could have grown up in any small town, certainly any small town in Kansas, and probably any small town in the United States, because so much of it is consistent and appropriate with any place. I'm not going to tell you where he did grow up. You may get a hint of that in the paper, but we'll leave it for that at this point and ask Kent to come forward and to read this paper to you. There's Kent Melcher.
Thank you, Bill. My pleasure to do this. I can't take any credit for either the writing or somebody who gave it to me to present today. All I can do is just do my best at carrying the sense of this wonderful writing, written by William McDermott and condensed from the Rotarian magazine. From my radio the other night came a familiar melody. How dear to this heart are the scenes of my childhood. And it sent my mind back over the trail of memory, back to the white cottage, with a whole block of ground for a yard, back to the hammock swinging beneath the apple trees, back to the neighbors exchanging jams, jellies, and tidbits of news, back to the leisure and serenity of a small town life at the turn of the century. Few of us are there who, having spent their youth in the open spaces of yesterday and then migrated to the city, do not grow misty-eyed as I did at the thought of these less troubled days, but as I dwelt on them through the glamorous mists of memory, some of the harder facts of life in my old hometown began to appear. Mine was a good town by the standards of the time. It won a $1,000 prize for being, quote, the model community of Kansas in which to rear children, end quote. But what happened to some of those children? Well, 2 of the gang I used to hang with as a little shaver became bums. 3 others, 2 of them deacons' sons, went to the penitentiary. Another had a clever lawyer. The rest turned out good, bad, and indifferent. In those good old days, we supplemented our juvenile income by peddling handbills, running cows to pasture, cleaning stables, and by sneaking into the back door of illegal saloons to sell, for 2 cents each, the empty whiskey and beer bottles we found along the road. On the 4th of July, it was great sport to throw cannon crack beneath jittery horses. 4 to 8-inch firecrackers were freely sold to children. The 4th was a day of runaways and fires and injuries and sometimes death. We used to have chariot races with the family vehicles, meeting on a country road wide enough for 2 or 3 buggies abreast. We would mark off a course. Then, whooping and yelling and laying on the whip, we worked those staid animals into a dead run, buggies clattering dangerously close to each other. Other times, we would play runaway. One driving the horse to the gallop, seesawing on the reins to make the vehicle swerve wildly and crazily. The other, posted 100 yards or so ahead, making a dive to catch the horse by the bit and the nose to stop him. We hung around Ulbrich stables, the source, I am sure, of all the obscenity in the world. We stole watermelons and fruit, milked farmers' cows, broke gas lights, played hooky from school. If we were mischievous, even destructive, remember, we were left mostly to our own devices. We just grew. Often that meant grew wild. Boy Scouts and 4-H clubs were unknown. Supervised playgrounds would have been laughed at. Summer camps had hardly been heard of. If we had organized school sports of today, the equipment and trained leadership available to cities and towns, we wouldn't have perpetrated the deviltry we did. In those days, public sanitation was a pitiful misnomer. Our communities buried babies by battalions. Raw river water was pumped into a reservoir, crudely filtered, and piped into homes. Once a year, the reservoir was drained and cleaned. Dead animals were nearly always found, a cat or a dog or a rabbit. Many homes had wells and a privy and a barnyard, all in the same lot. A well was used until the water tasted or smelled bad. Outhouses were cleaned by a city scavenger. His implements were a covered wagon, a muck fork, and a barrel of lime. The dump was the riverbank below town, but only 12 miles above the water intake of another town. No wonder typhoid was common. It was a disease to strike terror to many hearts. Several of my playmates, including my high school sweetheart, died of it. In those days, anybody could run a dairy. The milk was strained through a cloth to get rid of drowned flies and dirt which dropped off the cow's udder. Raw milk in huge cans was toted out in spring wagons. A quart cup was used to measure the milk, and the fluid was placed in any container, such as a crock or a dish that the housewife might put out on the porch. There was no inspection of cows, no tuberculin tests, no compulsory cleanliness. In grocery stores, food was kept in open containers. Careless clerks didn't worry about covering edibles when they swept. Down each side of Main Street was a continuous string of hitching posts. A businessman would drive to work in the morning, hitch his horse out in front all day, and drive home at night. Manure would pile up, dry out in the wind, and go sweeping down the street in blinding dust while the flies spread to the grocery store. The flies plagued us in droves. Every home had its own homemade fly shooing device, strips of paper nailed to the end of a stick which was swished through the air to keep flies out of our food. There was a lot of town pride, but it took strange forms. We were proud of our churches, but they battled continuously over doctrine, and each claimed a monopoly on the Lord. When a devout Methodist woman married a Baptist widower and joined his church, bigoted tongues wagged furiously. In the stores, women clerks stood from 8 until 6 at their counters until 10 on Saturdays for $6 a week. Nobody protested. The town was without a hospital. Fatal lockjaw was frequent. Once, when I was 8 years old, a growth in my throat shut off my breath. I was blue from strangulation and apparently had only a few minutes to live. The old family doctor laid me out on the kitchen table, put in a silver tube, and I breathed again. He'd never seen the operation done, but had read about it and took a chance. We didn't have a gymnasium game or game room in the town. Finally, a revivalist held a meeting and raised $12,000 for a YMCA building. It had a gymnasium, a library, and baths. The novelty of anything but a wash tub bath caused the townsmen to work those facilities nearly to death. Most school children went only through the 8th grade. The high school occupied 4 rooms on the 2nd floor of an all-service building. In my graduation class, there were 4 boys and 17 girls. Today, 200 graduate in a year. We were all well-intentioned, but smug. We sang sentimental old songs, liked the new ragtime, but we thought any music above that was only the foible of highbrows. We would have considered it sissy the great high school choirs of today, which sing masterpieces of music. We didn't know the meaning of a symphony or an oratorio, and we didn't care. How different our tastes were from those of the youngsters today, who unaffectedly like good music, art, and literature. Public transportation was a matter of mule-drawn streetcars. Between collecting fares, the drivers would use black snake whips to get up speed. Downhill, they would let the car run into the mule's heels to make them move. It was considered anyone's inherent right to beat his horse, his dog, or his children as he saw fit. One of the nightmares of my memory is the appearance of the half-starved, listless hack horses which met the trains. Their ribs stuck out like sores, and of the way their drivers kicked, yanked, and tortured them. It's years since I've seen the sadistic cruelty we accepted as commonplace. I haven't named my old hometown until now because I want you to see it as it is instead of as it was. It's Winfield, Kansas, a fine home community of 10,000 people. Streets are paved, homes are lovely, and every conceivable convenience is available. 2 fine hospitals serve the sick for hundreds of miles around. Schools are well equipped. Playgrounds and gymnasiums are plentiful. The college gym will accommodate 4,000 spectators for a basketball game, or 5,000 for the annual presentation of the Messiah. There is a community spirit which is a revelation to one who has been away for nearly a third of a century. There has been no municipal operation tax in Winfield for 20 years. The profits from the municipal electric light plant pay all city expenses except schools and provide money to build parks, a city hall, stadium, and a $300,000 dike to prevent floods. In the churches, bickering over doctrine has disappeared. Yearly, leading churches join in a union meeting of spiritual instruction and inspiration. They support community funds for relief, work together for the Red Cross, advance religious education, have drama clubs for youth, and their leaders are active in Rotary Club and the Chamber of Commerce, projects for community development and betterment. Rotary has a loan fund which has aided scores of needy students and the flourishing junior baseball league of 120 boys. The churches preach religion still, but work for heaven here as well as hereafter. And how about youth? Well, they are still thrill seekers, just like my generation. They get into jams and speeding, and they have to be straightened out occasionally. But they have aspirations and ambition, prepare for vocations and citizenship, and go to college in large numbers. The only distressing thing about them is their pessimism. They've grown up to doubt that there's any progress in the world. If I could only make them realize what progress there has been just since my generation, maybe they'd see then that there is a march of civilization worth preserving and even worth fighting for. How can I prove to them, with an incomparably better environment, with a franker view on life, and with ideals that a turbulent decade has not destroyed, that they run rings around anything we had in my generation? Doubtless they'll discover that in time. Meanwhile, I note that the good old days are gone forever, and I see no cause for tears.
And thanks to Jerry Wallace, we know a little bit more about William P. McDermott, who wrote this, first appeared at least in 1941, and was written with the goal of showing us the other side of the good old days in Winfield, Kansas, or we thought for that matter, any other small town in the state of Kansas or elsewhere for that matter. McDermott was born in 1888 in Winfield. His father was James McDermott, who a lot of you history folks will recognize as a founder of the town of Dexter, and was a very prominent Winfield lawyer during the 1880s and 90s around here. He obviously, McDermott went to school here at Winfield, graduated from Southwestern College, and got a journalism degree, and began working on newspapers. Worked ultimately in Kansas City, and ultimately then ended up in Chicago, where he spent, looks like, the majority of his life. He also, while in Chicago, went to seminary and was ordained as a Presbyterian minister, and then worked both in journalism and religious circles from there on. I think it's Kent did an especially good job, especially considering Kent is a retired Methodist pastor reading something that was written by a Presbyterian. So anyhow, we thought this article would be something of interest to you because it does deal with small town history and all of that. Our next presenter is somebody, again, that really hardly needs any introduction to this group, because everybody has, one way or another, has had a chance to get to see her and get to know her. She, again, we put up with her. I know she's an Atlanta native, and so even irrespective of that, she's been here long enough to consider her a Winfield or two, and is really great on all kinds of historical issues, and especially if you need to know something about the Atlanta, Baden area. She's done a lot of research on those areas and has lots of good things to know about those suits. So if you would please, let's welcome Gloria Ulbrich.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yikes. This is a big group. I'm a little bit intimidated, especially following all these great speakers. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your morning to come and listen about history. I personally love history. I'm not sure I did when I was in school, but I do now, and I share a lot of old pictures and information with Winfield and the surrounding area via Facebook, and I know some of you have seen some of that. In celebration this year, Winfield is 150. I'm very excited about that, and I'm a part of the committee that is hoping to put on our Winfield celebration. June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th is the big community celebration, and there will be lots of activities for all of you to attend. I am co-chair with Diane Williams of the Grand Parade, which will happen at 11 o'clock on that Saturday morning, and I'm really hoping to recruit floats and excitement and great things to celebrate Winfield. You too could be a part of history if you participate in that event. At 10 o'clock that morning, we're doing a community photo at the corner of 9th and Main, where, as you see, there used to be a whole lot of people, and we hope to have all of those there again this time. And then the parade will start at 11 and go from 7th to 17th. So it's going to be a big parade. John Baker's going to have a lot of cars there that are from around the neighborhood. There's just a lot of different community events that will occur there, and also at Island Park. Cindy with the museum, there'll be historical reenactors. I hope to open up the lobby of RCB Bank that afternoon and give a mural tour, talk about the mural and its history. So that's my 5 minutes of plug for the parade. But first of all, in celebration, I wrote this paper, but there were some people who helped me a great deal, and I would like to thank them. Jerry Wallace, formerly of the National Archives, he shared a lot of information with me. Bob Harton, Chris Flower, Eileen Cummings all gave me some information and thoughts and contributions. I really do want to reach out and thank Judy Krause. Judy's right up here. If you have not met Judy, she is a master researcher. She used to work for a title office, and she has researched so many of the buildings in Winfield and traced their history from their beginning to the present. On the table over here, there are some newspaper advertisements, mostly from the 1800s, well, in fact, all from the 1800s, advertising some of the early businesses. So she has shared those with me. Check out, there's William Newton. There's just a variety of great ads, and we've had fun together working on this project. I also want to thank my daughter, Crystal Kokenauer, and her husband, Brent. They helped me with some of the reviews and critiques. Also to Jane Sandbolt, who did all of our editing, and Sarah Weiner, who helped put the books together. So you can see this is not a me thing, this is a group thing. Hopefully that'll help me share with all of you. Occasionally there are some differences on dates. I found some of those challenging because there's just some differences that sometimes you struggle to work out. A great resource I also used was Wirt Walton. He was a young newspaper editor for the Courier, and he put together some interesting information about Winfield. I also used E.C. Manning's autobiography. It's a great read, it's at the museum, and there are many other great articles at the museum as well. If you have not been to the Cowley County Museum, you should go there because it's pretty amazing. And it's open every day except Mondays. So Tuesday, 1 to 4, every day. I'm like a commercial, right? Thank you. There's a lot of information in the booklet that I'm not going to share today in the interest of time. You don't want to be here all afternoon. So let's get started. We're going to talk about early Kansas. It was not for the faint-hearted. Early pioneers told stories about drought, conflicts with border states, quarrels between the settlers, skirmishes, and the hardships of establishing a new land in unfamiliar territory. The Civil War was over. Peacetime was here, and the soldier became a civilian. They needed homes, and soaring prices in the East encouraged people to move west. And some of these people had visions of what a new country could become. And I think that's what some of the people who came to Winfield really had, was that vision of what they wanted. The Kansas Senate and House of Representatives established Cowley County on March 3rd of 1867. You will see Matthew Cowley. He is a soldier with the 9th Kansas Regiment. I think we're one ahead there. No? Oh no. We're going to give it a moment. I really want those slides. Do you have I have a thumb drive if we need to grab it real quick. Projection. Oh. Amy, did we lose the Wi-Fi signal? Well, I'm going to march ahead a little bit here. Cowley County was established 3rd day of March in 1867, and we have a slide going to come up of Matthew Cowley, who was one of the first settlers in Butler County, and he helped also lay out Butler and Cowley. In Kansas in 1854, it was part of the High Plains that was known as the Great American Desert. Lack of wood and water was thought to be a problem, so many people kept right on going through here. They decided there was better land further west, and this became one of the last lands held by the Indian and the buffalo. But the steady supply of water from Walnut and Timber Creek, and wonderful game, bison, deer, other small game gave them food for the early settlers. Remember though that when Cowley County was organized, this was still part of Osage Diminished Reserve, the Osage Indian Diminished Reserve. So really anyone who came into this area were squatters on Indian land. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Very interesting. So from the period March 3rd, 1867 to 1870, this was Osage and Cherokee land. There was a trail along the southern border where Cherokee Indians went to their hunting grounds. This was known as the Cherokee Strip, a little bit different than the Cherokee Strip Run of 1893. Directly north of this was an area 30 miles wide that was part of the Osage Indian Diminished Reserve, and this was a well-traveled trail. Originally, there was an Osage Indian village on the east side of Timber Creek, just above Island Park. And Island Park was the established trading area for the Indians. The Osage tribes used this neutral strip of land to make raids down into Texas, where often cattle were stolen, horses also, and they were sold to early cattle entrepreneurs who were trying to make some money. And it was those early entrepreneurs, when they came through this area, that gave a first-hand account about Cowley's beautiful prairies, bottomlands, and the streams that we had. 1868, the first log cabin was built in Cowley County by Newton Thompson. Are we doing it again?
Maybe.
Maybe. So go to Matthew Cowley, if you will. Good, stop right there.
Here we go.
Okay, there we go. There's Mr. Matthew Cowley, who our county is named for. We go on by that one, please. This showed the Osage diminished reserve, the map of what was considered the Osage area. And next. Here are some of the Osage Indians. That photo on the right side is a photo by Prettyman out of Arkansas City. I love that picture. Okay, I think we're caught up there. Sometime in June of 1869, a gentleman named Clifford Wood, he was a clerk in a Cottonwood Falls store, heard about the area, and he came with a friend to explore. He found a small log house owned by James Renfro, and after visiting in the area, he returned to Cottonwood Falls to get supplies to sell to the Indians and the settlers. In August of that year, Osage chiefs ordered all the settlers out of the valley. And so he took his goods up to the Butler County line. Later, the Osage did burn out the little house where the supplies were stored. And this was a kind of rough time. Many of the settlers left the area. Remembering again, they're trespassers. The Osage Indian chief Chitopa, he allowed them to stay eventually if they would pay a price of $5 a head for peace. Settlers thought this was a cheap price to pay. There's a picture of Chitopa from the Cherokee Street Museum in Arkansas City. This is the only picture I've ever seen of Chitopa. At this time, land was surveyed, and claim corners were designated by stakes, and the claim holders' intentions were put out on a shingle, which written in charcoal. And some of them said, as I have in the book here, this claim was taken by me on the 20th day of January, 1869. I've gone after my family. Anyone who dares squat on my claim while I'm gone will get a load of buckshot when I get back. There's plenty of good claims just south of me. Can you imagine? Seriously. Claim disputes are settled by tribunals called settlers' unions. And sometimes there were public meetings where claimants presented their cases. Apparently this was a very big issue back in those days. Now we come to E.C. Manning, Edwin Cassandra Manning. He was born in 1838 in Redford, New York. As a young man, he was energetic, enterprising, and inspired and wanted to launch into new country. He'd been in the Company H of the regular volunteer Kansas Cavalry, and he helped organize a unit for protection. He was made a colonel, and the regiment remained until the end of the war in 1865. Seeing an opportunity, in spring of 1869, Manning formed a partnership with Mr. Baker of Manhattan and looked forward to coming to the Walnut River Valley. As they continued south, they met several obstacles, rain, high water, etc. Some of the party that was with him turned back, but Manning continued. Near Douglas, they found a small outpost that was 1.5 miles north of the Indian reservation land. Manning's own words tell of his excitement upon discovering the treasures of Cowley County. This excitement motivated him to call the area home and later to become the founder of Winfield. The quote from his autobiography says, "Springs of pure water in abundance, immense stretches of timber, and wonderful grass everywhere. The broad bottom lands were sloping to the highlands, and plenty of rosin weeds everywhere, a sure indicator of rich soil." So is rosin weeds really an indicator? Oh, farm people, I don't know. But he thought it was a wonderful place. He waxed on and on in his book about how wonderful Cowley County was. In early 1869, Manning helped Peter Becker, a German immigrant, help establish the first building about 2 miles south of Winfield. Manning had become well connected. He was aware that negotiations were pending between the government and the Indians for those diminished reserve lands. And then on June 11th of 1869, Manning established his own claim on the present town site of Winfield. There were several famous names that we know around Winfield that also came and settled here. Alonzo Hallen, Mr. Andrews, Joel Mack, you've heard of Joel Mack Road, H.C. Loomis, Armstrong Meaner. It was challenging during this time. Lumber had to be hauled over 100 miles because there were no roads. Not any of those bridges yet had been made. In October and November of 1869, Manning built a cabin near present-day Manning and 8th Streets. The Winfield Town Company was organized in Manning's cabin, January 13th of 1870. Manning entered into his own agreement with Chief Chautauqua for peace in the area. And basically the agreement was for $6, a little bit more, for peaceful and unmolested occupancy of land on the reservation for 1 year. It was witnessed with Chautauqua's ex, and he had an interpreter who also helped him. In his own way, again, Chautauqua was a politician. He managed to work things out a lot better than in the past. Establishing the county seat. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on how Cowley County the county seat was established. There was some controversy, of course, between Winfield and Arkansas City. We've had papers on that before, and I'm sure you can find much more information at the museum. There was a trip where E.C. Manning went to Topeka by stagecoach to file the papers to establish Cowley County as a temporary county seat. And this was a very controversial matter and probably helped start the Arkansas City-Winfield rivalry, which sadly enough still continues to a limited degree today. After the county seat was established, there were 3 townships, Rock, Winfield, and Crestwell. And then there was an election on May of 1870. And for county seat, Winfield received 108 votes, and Ark City received 55. So that's how Winfield became the county seat. That's a very abbreviated portion. Very abbreviated, right, Bob? The first coach arrived with United States Mail in Winfield in June of 1870. Before that, it had always been brought by private hands from Douglas to Winfield. And later that year, that's when Congress passed a law to open up the Osage Diminished Reserve to settlers. You did have occupancy and improvement requirements during the first 6 months to prove your claim. In January of 1871, there was a survey party under Oliver Short who began the survey of the county. There was new excitement in this because some settlers felt like that established lines were not correct. Surveyors were followed by claim hunters who hoped the survey would show unoccupied tracts and errors. I read where for $50, sometimes lines would change. So it was a dangerous job too. In Oklahoma, there were some stories about how surveyors were killed because of people did not like what had occurred. The land bandits often followed the surveyor. Some of the lines were crooked, and some of the settlers would follow with a team of horses and lumber because you had to immediately protect your claim. And so this was a rough time, I would say, during our history. So naming Winfield. The question of a name for the new town puzzled our founders for several days. The name Lagonda was favored. It's an Indian term meaning clear water. But however, Manning, he located the main street by the North Star. He did not have a compass, but later we discovered it was only off 15 degrees in magnetic variation. Mr. Andrews, he suggested the name of Winfield. as he just returned from a trip where he met Reverend Winfield Scott, a Baptist minister, who said, if you're going to start a town down there, and we'll give it my name, Winfield, I'll go down and build a house of worship for you. And this name was adopted, and a structure was later built between 7th and 8th Streets. Originally, the Old California Trail was used as a guide for establishment of the town. According to Manning, the Indians had followed the buffalo from south to north and then returned with robes and meat into the Walnut Valley. It was also part of the original route of the gold-seeking 49ers. The trail crossed the Walnut River, proceeded to higher ground to avoid the winding Walnut. It wound by the old lime kiln. Some of you may have seen this. That is close to present-day Tunnel Mill. If you'll hit the slide there, Gary, I think it comes up. That's the lime kiln. We had an opportunity to visit that a few years ago. Pretty neat. The lime kiln was used to fire limestone and turn it into mortar, which helped some of the buildings. Also, I think plaster, if I recall hearing that, was made there. Manning donated a 40-acre plot for the town company, and Main Street moved 1 block over, because originally we believed that Manning's store was across the street from Napa Auto Parts. There's that parking lot. We believe that was the original location of the old log store, first building in Winfield. But in 1878 edition of the Courier stated it had been moved. They put wheels under it, log wheels, not regular wheels, and drug it to the current the location that is where Union State Bank is today. So that's where the old log store was relocated. That building served many things to the town. It had been a store, a church, political headquarters, law office, post office, schoolhouse, and just about everything the town needed. Manning quoted in his autobiography, he said, if I had set my log store elsewhere, few of those traveling the trail would have found me. And this, of course, became our present-day Main Street. I wanted to cover a few others of Winfield's firsts. Right after Manning's claim was converted or established, Dr. Mansfield came. He was Winfield's first doctor. There's kind of a neat ad over there on one of those boards from Dr. Mansfield. And then Max Schob came and built a log cabin where Reed's Bank was located, close to present-day Graves Drug Store. So those were some of the first businesses. Manning, of course, sold supplies at the old log store. It really wasn't more for profit than it was to accommodate the settlers. The first post office was at that store. And then C.A. Bliss and Company bought out the supplies and turned it into a mercantile. The summer of 1870, a branch of the Southwestern Stage and Omnibus Company came into the county. This was important. A rate of 10 cents per mile was charged to passengers. This is an old stagecoach stop that is close to the Tunnel Mill Dam area. So now, by 1871, Winfield had stage lines running, 3 different stage lines running to it, so it was progressing quickly. Fire protection. I thought this was interesting. The Winfield organized a fire department in 1882, and there were 25 volunteers. Prior to that time, businesses were asked to put a bucket and a step ladder by their building. That's really effective. The following year, merchants were asked to keep a barrel of water. So we realized that the bucket wasn't going to handle it. And in 1877, it brought the installation of a fire alarm bell in a downtown building. In 1886, the fire department became an official part of the city. And by 1888, the department had moved into its new building at 9th and Fuller. 1910, the fire department was a horse-drawn cart and 2 horses. This is a parade showing one of the old fire, I don't know what you call that thing, brigade or something. A pumper, there you go, there's the word I'm looking for. And in 1915, a motor-driven truck was purchased. In You can see that. It's kind of a cool picture with the old background of the fire station. So a lot of changes there with the fire department. Moving on to schools. In 1872, the town began building a schoolhouse for their students. Before that, Miss Annie Marks had begun a subscription school in 1870. The Winfield Messenger printed in 1872 that the settlers of this county believed in schools and showed determination that the young Cowleyites have the means of a good education within their reach. Schools functioned in many other ways too. They would often be social places, having box suppers, and you've heard all the things that little country schools did. By 1872, construction had begun on the central school, a stone building used by elementary and high school students. By 1880, a 3-story addition had been added. Webster constructed in 1884, Bryant in 1886, home of the museum, Lowell and Irving in 1893. Schools, as Kent mentioned earlier, hold many memories for Winfield students. A lot of the students had worked on the farm and did not always come to school. Generally, grades were held in the same classroom with only one teacher. Schools were heated by wood and coal, and often the older students' responsibility was to stoke the fire. Basic math and English were pretty much what you learned. School is not a requirement, but a privilege. In 1873, the Courier reported that low enrollment and attendance was a problem. So we continue to strive to correct those issues throughout the years. The first library opened in 1880. However, it was just a small library, and later in 1912, there was a grant to build the library that used to be down there on Millington Street. It's now the dance studio. The city paid for books, salaries, and upkeep of the building. And during World War I, the basement was used to make surgical dressings. Other types of schools, the state school, the Winfield, I backed up there, there's Lowell Elementary. Wasn't that an amazing building? I just think that is so cool. The Winfield State Hospital, also was known as the state school, was established by the Kansas legislature in 1881 due to the dedication of Major J.B. Abbott. He was a veteran of the Army. His daughter, Belle, was one of the first students there. And this became, of course, a major employer until its closing in 1996. Moving on to the colleges, Southwest College, now Southwestern, founded in 1885 by the Methodist Episcopal Church. This love of education by the circuit riders helped shape this landscape. The college graduated its first 3 students June of 1889, and in 1909 changed its name from the Southwest Kansas Conference College to Southwestern. In the 1890s, the college was challenged with many crises of survival due to economic depression and serious drought in the community. At one time, First National Bank of Winfield's banker W.C. Robinson received the deed to the college. Robinson's brother, M.L., who really was a huge force in the development of Winfield, M.L. had passed away at age 45, but he was the one who helped bring the college to Winfield. After they struggled, Robinson picked up many of the debts of the college personally with his own money. He even bought the furnishings and later gave them back to the college. New leadership helped them work through the crisis, and dedication and determination of supporters helped make that a success. You lost a picture again. Our picture is struggling today. Ground was broken in 1893 for the building of St. John's, and Baden Hall dedicated in 1894. John Peter Baden, we're going to talk about him a little bit more later, but he was a huge part of Winfield's success. 1899, he helped organize and open St. Mary's Hospital and also the Lutheran Children's Home. which helped many orphan children. I did cover some of the same stuff that Kent talked about with sanitation. The city council had set out some guidelines in 1873 to satisfy the pressing needs that from regulating destitute people, sanitation, fire protection, to just plain old lawlessness. And again, some of the water situation caused the dysentery, the typhoid, many of those diseases. I have a really cool picture of a prescription medicine bottle from a Winfield business, Meyer druggist, that was close to where Eagle's Nest is today. Just showing that we were trying to get that under control. The founders found out that organization of a new city took a lot of work. And in 1884, they even lined and cleaned the streets, helped prevent the spread of diphtheria. It was a major economic epidemic threat during this period.
We've lost it.
We've lost it.
Modern technology is so good. Oh my God.
That's exactly right. I'm going to reset it, it looks like here. I'm going to march ahead a little bit. Oh, here we go. Yeah. I don't recognize the picture. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the notable architecture improvements. D.A. Millington was the first engineer and land surveyor. He helped lay off the land. After one lot was sold, sometimes he would give away another one for free. Millington and J.C. Fuller helped Manning so much make this town a success. Millington had the connections back east with the East Coast bankers, so he helped bring money to the community, which was something, someone told me the difference between Winfield and our Kansas City was that our Kansas City founders brought more money to start the town than what Winfield did. I found that interesting, but Millington truly did have those connections. Also, Millington gave out trees. Whenever someone would get a lot, he would give out a tree to plant, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why we have the beautiful trees that we enjoy today. The first hotel opened on the corner of 9th and Main, where the Cowley County National Bank was, by Mr. Short. Mr. Short didn't think much of the idea. There wasn't anything on the east side of Main Street. And so after a tri-weekly mail route started, there was a treaty with the Indians, the newspaper began, a sawmill. He thought maybe it sounded okay, and so he set up and constructed the hotel. I have a couple of pictures of old hotels. I do not have a picture of his hotel. I could not find one anywhere. The funny thing, though, it said the mattresses were stuffed with prairie feathers. I wonder what that is. It's probably grass is what I would think, because I doubt there were that many feathers out there. There were no bed springs. I also had a slide of the Williams House, which is another early hotel at the corner of 10th and Main, still there today as Moonshadow Books. You may have heard of the Ghost of Winfield. It's on the side of that building, and that was one of the early hotels also. 1870, the first water well was dug on Main Street and found pure cold water 32 feet below the surface of the earth. The Winfield Water Company was established in 1883, purchased by the city in 1909. Water had come from the Walnut River until pollution from oil wells forced the city to dig several water wells. The city's source of electricity and natural gas followed a similar pattern. When it comes up, we'll catch up a little bit with the slides. In 1887, the City Council authorized Winfield Electric to construct and build a small steam generator. The city took over the power plant in 1904, and while people were enjoying, go back to the colleges. If you see the colleges,
Okay.
I think that's about where we lost power. Sorry, guys, but a little back further. About 3 or 4 more back. How do you like that slideshow? Okay, this was shown, that's part up right there. That is where Blues is today. I was showing the, how it was a grocery store. I think that's a very cool picture. I guess there were 4 or 5 different types of businesses that occupied the business as well. There's a rumor, should I tell the rumor, Judy? There's a rumor, according to the proprietor there, that the upstairs was a brothel. However, we've not proven that. So go forward, please, Gary. This was showing one of the early stores in Winfield. All the canned goods piled everywhere. Isn't that crazy? There's the Summermeyer Druggist from Winfield, Kansas. It was where the Eagle's Nest is. Interesting, I bought this bulb on eBay, and it was in Canton, Ohio, so it came from Winfield, Kansas, traveled clear to Canton, Ohio, and came back again. Next. This is Millington. There's one of his ads advertising the lots. It's also, I think, over there. And then his tombstone. He's buried in Union Graham. I know I'm going to give a plug for our Voices from the Past. Next year, I think we're doing our founding fathers in the cemetery tour. So some of those will be out there. Onward. This is the Central Hotel. This was right north of Union State Bank today. This was destroyed in a fire. Keep going. Here's the Williams House. That's the corner of 10th and Main. Very cool. If you look at that building, that picture's not the greatest, but the building is still the same today. All the windows are boarded up. Next. White Way at Night. This is when the city introduced, I think this is about where we're caught up. People were enjoying the Chautauqua when the electricity was turned on for the very first time. And it was called White Way at Night. This is a painting of 9th and Main, but you can see they focused on all the lights in the windows. And there was even a restaurant called White Way. So this is a big deal. You think about electricity coming to town. Wow. That was the first gas, also 1884, by the Winfield Natural Gas Company. It was a firm headed by J.C. Fuller. Again, that Fuller was a huge influence, had the first bank in town, and now here the gas company. In 1885, telephone service. The local service was actually established in 1881, and 4 years later, we were able to connect Wichita to Wellington. Woohoo! All right, let's see here. We're going to skip a little bit of this. The first brick building in the county was Reed's Bank, which later became First National, built in 1873 at 903 Main. So over in the neighborhood of Graves Drug Store. The end to buildings made of wood primarily occurred in 1877 when the city decided to limit to brick or stone. They stated that wooden buildings were not safe. Again, we're back, I'm sure having issued with fire and not any cheaper than brick or stone. And a final ordinance was passed after the big fire of 1880. 1876, the Courier had a great story about brick makers in the town. There were 3 known brick yards, and there was serious competition. There were a lot of ads for bricks, trying to reach out and get your business. The 1890s saw the growth of buildings. They were giving away from 1 story, going up having 2 and 3 to reach out for doctors and lawyers that did not require large spaces. The boom period from 1878 to 1900 included things like Cowley County National Bank, First National Bank, the Breton Hotel, the Mighton Hardware. There's just a lot of those old buildings that were built during this period. The North Hall of Southwestern College, the Winfield City Building, First Baptist Church, all constructed during that time frame. Some stores had underground businesses in their basements. If you'll go back, oh no, go forward, sorry. This is a picture of the Cowley County National Bank, where the Mexican restaurant is now. And you can see in that picture where it says barbershop, there's an underground barbershop, there's a cigar store there, just a lot of the underground businesses. Some of them were used for cold storage as well as operating businesses. Also the underground tunnels. This was a hard topic for me. I talked to several people asking questions. I could find nothing in research about the underground tunnels. The only thing is I know they existed, as many of you know that too.
Yes, I do.
There was a network around, there was a network around the downtown with the tunnels. And I do remember when Richard Jarvis would talk about that there was a tunnel behind the First National Bank that went over to the donut shop. I know there was one from the Cowley County National, went down the street to the Lagonda. I've heard some stories about that, but I've been unable to find anything to back up that by a news story. It was an underground method that you could travel between businesses. In 1885 and 86, many of our buildings were constructed from the magnesium limestone from quarries in the area. These quarries were huge and very important to contribute to the growth of our town. Cowley County National, First National were two of the first ones made. I know that First National was completed in 1886, and Cowley County was actually a little bit before that. At one time, there were 5 quarries around Winfield, even one in the city limits. The local stone was of fine quality, pure, and had light color. The texture made easy sawing, and it hardened after exposure to the weather. And over 100 years later, that still proved to be true. First Bank, established in 1871 by J.C. Fuller, and ended up with a prepaid capital of $50,000. In those days, bankers relied on their own resources to fund the bank. Money was scarce, and deposits were small. The second bank is that of M.L. Reed, which later became the First National Bank. I'm going to shorten some of this. You don't want to be here all day, right? Am I past time already?
Oh, way past.
Way past. All right. We're going to kind of move along here. In the early years, there were bank panics. The bankers met every night and had an agreement among themselves that they would disclose the amount of cash they had on hand. They would not take an account from another bank in town. They would pay every check without a controversy. So that was helping. That helped save a lot of our part of our community during crucial times of the 1893 bank panic. But drum roll, Winfield became a city of the third class on February 22nd, 1873. That's why we're celebrating this year. Woo-hoo! Are you excited? Are you awake yet? I'm going to really quick go through the rest of this because I don't want to keep you here all. The newspaper started August 13th of 1870. You can see we had a number of newspapers during that time. But a big deal, on September 30th of 1879, the first train pulled into Winfield. The Santa Fe line ran from Winfield to Wichita. A train was a big thing for the community. A town would not survive if you did not have a train, and often some of the smaller towns would move to be where the train was coming through. They would move even if they heard a rumor the train was coming through. So up in the right-hand corner is the first train into Winfield. There's some ladies waiting to board the train. The next slide That's the day they met me when I came into Winfield. And the next slide is a demonstration train of Santa Fe that I think is a really cool picture, and I like it a lot. Next one, Gary. There we go. I love it because you can see the old depot in the background. That's just really a neat old picture. So moving on real quickly, I mentioned John Peter Baden. Honestly, Baden was a huge influence too. You know, there were some real town builders. Baden was one of those he started out with a poultry and egg plant, moving on to Baden Mills. We all know about that. He helped build the Lutheran Church. Ice plant, he started St. John's. St. John's, he didn't have any money to start that, but he believed in the success of his businesses and the people of Winfield to promote. And that's how St. John's became what it is. That's the mill. Next picture. Real quickly, here's one of our oldest businesses in Winfield. This is Kiger's Furniture. On the right side of the picture, it says secondhand store, and it's Kiger's. I received permission to use this picture from the family. And the right side is Blues. So it has changed a little bit. There's a great story about how Mr. Kiger's son went to Chicago as a furniture buyer during Prohibition time. You know, hey, you couldn't have any liquor here. That was banned. But guess what? Chest of drawers will hold liquor. So that liquor came back to Winfield, and I heard it was sold out the back door of Kiger Furniture. Kiger's was also an undertaker. They had, where Trunk and Treasures is today, I understand was where the undertaker part of their business was. There were many challenges during this time. We are getting to the end, I promise. Close. Indians, 1874, they brought rumors that we were going to have an Indian attack, and they sent the military here. Nothing happened. Grasshoppers, this was a huge one. 1873-74, there had been prairie fires, grass would spin, and here come the grasshoppers. And this was a huge blow to Winfield. They arrived in swarms, they blacked out the sun, they ate the crops down to the ground. Farmers rushed to cover their wells. They tried to save things by covering them with blankets and cloth, but there were too many and they chewed through the fabric. Said they would eat the wool off the sheep's back, they would eat the dish towels on the table, and even the tool handles. So many across Kansas, tens of thousands of people left and went back east because they had no food, winter's coming on, they had no money, and so they left and went back east. Farmers' aid trains were established to help people because times were very hard. It took several years for that to make up the population of what the town had lost. Liquor, prostitution, gambling, our favorite subjects, right? They were all influential in Winfield too. Judy has done a lot of great research about Mickey Jim. He was a stagecoach driver. He retired to Winfield to open a saloon. It was right back approximately where Eagle's Nest is today. It was the first brick saloon. Paid $2,500 for it, and he paid $2,000 bond and $300 to get a liquor license. Guess what it costs today to get a liquor license? Do you know, Bill? $300. He has not increased that. That might be a thought. Anyway, Mickey Jim Fahey, we have some of his ads. He was quite a character. He struggled. Sometimes he'd sell whiskey on Sunday. He'd get arrested. He'd have to pay a fine. He had a colorful life. Oh, we're up again. Good. Next one. This is as we all know, Winfield. Oh, my. That's strange. It didn't look like that. It's like two together. It's the signal. Well, anyway, this is a cool picture of a wet day. It says a wet day in a dry town. Saloons were banned in Winfield in 1880. However, the cost to operate the city was around $13,000, but only $8,000 came in taxes, so they were short. So a common theme that occurred, they allowed saloons and prostitution, and then they would fine the owners. Winfield had 6 illegal saloons, and they paid a $100 fee for being a public nuisance. So they would pay their fee, and then they could resume business. Yay! This helped cover the operation costs of the city. Some took a dim view of this situation, thought it was a covenant between the city and the devil. 1879, we attempted to ban gambling. In 1885, we published an ordinance to punish prostitution. Dust was a huge deal in 1874. 1880, there was a big fire that wiped out a lot of the landmarks of the town, and it wiped out where the old log store was, the Central Hotel. People were throwing stuff out the windows, destroyed the livery barn. A lot of things happened with that. And this is not a picture of that particular fire, but one close to that time frame. I do not have a picture of that particular fire. Finally, in 1893, Constable Sivard was in a situation with, again, involving bootleggers, and sadly enough, he was shot and killed at the corner of 9th and Main, where the Bronze Star is today. Real quickly, the next slide shows some people building the Cowley County Courthouse. It's a kind of an interesting picture if you study it closely. There was a jail there. It cost $2,700 when it was built. Next slide, Gary. This is the courthouse. I understand it's the second one. Apparently we've been through a few courthouses in our time. Moving on. 1887 started the streetcar, mule-drawn streetcar system that you've heard about today. Started near Island Park, went down to 14th, and then west to the depot. And in 1909, the mule cars were replaced by electric trolley cars. Some of our attempts to make our streets better, we did street paving with crushed stone from 5th Street to 14th Street, 1887. This was quarried stone. It was an expensive failure when the wagon traffic ruined the surface of the street. By 1911, we started using the brick streets. In 1925, we had 25 miles of pavement brick and asphalt. And speaking of brick, I neglected to mention back on the sanitation part, I have an old brick courtesy of Roger Lindgren that says, "Don't spit on the sidewalk." Entertainment, the Cowley County Fair, the Agricultural Society started in 1871, incorporated under state law. And there's some of the fun fair posters. 1887 brought the first Chautauqua at Island Park. This was a huge source of entertainment and how we learn things. If you think about, we had no TV, and so people got together at the park and we learned about what was happening in the world. We've had some famous people come to Winfield through the Chautauquas, and it was a great experience. Winfield Municipal Band, another huge, wonderful group that's continued through many years. This picture is from 1910, showing Winfield and how it has grown. In a few short years, basically 30 years, Winfield had truly become a boom town. Some of our businesses and organizations started 150 years ago. I think that's pretty cool that some of them are still here today. Good things can come from small beginnings and dreams in the hearts of men and women. Strong work ethic, good sense of humor, good values, and a sense of purpose is how Winfield began, grew, and prospered. And thank you for your time and listening to Winfield.
Well, that concludes this morning's presentation. We certainly want to thank you all for joining us for the 2023 celebrate Cowley County History Program. I remind you to stop over here by the museum table, see if there's anything there that you might want to pick up. And don't forget the blue containers in the center of the table to help us pay for this morning. And again, thank you all very much. We certainly appreciate seeing y'all. We look forward to seeing you again in 2024. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what we always do. We just load it up.
Do the original deeds that come out now?
Yes.
Very nice contribution.
It was fun.
Take care, Judy.
You too.
See you later. Okay.
Maybe I'll try Greg in next year.
Yeah.
Hey, Jody.
Thank you. With my grandmother's.
Your grandmother's?
Her box was. Does that make sense?
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, it's got the town on the back of it.
I got one for my mother's. A big.
Oh, don't, we have some,
Figure out what.
we have some multi-media things, so we stack them.
Yes, I'm putting them all right here in the box and then I'll lawyer here.
Oh, you're putting it all in, okay.
I already hear I take sort of them.
Okay.
Pins are in here too. I figure if I put them all in one box, that's almost easy.
Yeah, so then they get wheeled in the other. You have an idea of crowd go?
I'm thinking that I had about 130, because we had a nice one down here, and I counted 37, well, if we may have had 35, because I didn't have a So I'm thinking we probably had closer to, I know we had 130, we had about 40. It's, well, that year, did you want it the car farm, or was it here? We had.
I heard that one sounds good.